There's a big difference between your will and the will of the Father for your life. Your will is something that you think is good for you. And this is also God's will, except that He has a plan for you. If you follow God's plan, He will produce so much more from your life. If you follow your will, it can lead you into a pig pen. And this is why I do these recordings. I first want to lead you away from that road, and hopefully by my own personal experience, I can lead you out of that pig pen and bring you back to the Father's house. I believe, like in Matthew 18:14, God's will is that none of these little ones should perish. But like lost sheep, we all at one time wander astray from home. And I'm hoping that my experience keeps you from wandering. Our will can only take us so far, no matter how strong it is. You cannot push your will past the Father. In fact, the only reason you're saved is because it was the Father's will. John 1:12 says, "As many as have received him, to them he gave power to become the sons of God, even to them that believe in his name." And in verse 13 it says, "Which were born not of blood, nor of the will of the flesh, nor of the will of men, but of God, who chose us to be adopted children of Jesus Christ." Ephesians 1:5 says, "Having predestined us into adoption of children by Jesus Christ to himself, according to the good pleasure of his will." And as of God's children, it is his will that continues in your life, not yours. John the Baptist said, "He must increase while I must decrease." James 4:15 reads, "For you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we shall live and do this or that." Remember, we're told in Matthew 10, "Thy kingdom come, thy will be done." As children of God, our will never gets us through challenges. Submit yourself to his will for you and accept it. He knows more than you, and he's not going to submit his plans to you for your approval. David got it right. In the book of Psalms, he says in chapter 40, verse 8, "I delight to do your will, O my God. Your law is within my heart." Know, as a child of God, you do have a will, and it's strong, but you need to know what to do with it. And what you need to do is follow the example of Jesus. In Matthew 26:39, he says, "If it possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not as I will, but your will be done." You subject yourself to the will of the Father in everything. Continuing to push your will in can only lead you to being willfully disobedient. Jesus also tells us in Matthew 3:35, "Those that do the will of the Father are my brothers, sister, and mother." Subjecting yourself to God's will makes you a member of the family. Now, Paul wrestled with his will and his nature and the will of God. In Romans 7:16, he says, "The things that I will to do, I don't do." Well, that's God's will. "The things that I do, I hate." And that's the will of his nature. He wants so much to do God's will, and he knows that the will of the flesh can produce no good thing. And he says this in Romans 7:18, "For I know that in me, that is in my flesh, dwells no good thing. For to do God's will is present with me, but how to perform that which is good, I can't find." When you learn that only God's will can produce a purpose for your life, you begin to try within yourself to perform good things. This is where the trouble starts. Because in the beginning of the verse, Paul says, "I know in my flesh dwells no good thing." Well, that means you can't perform good things from your life to represent God's will. This wrestling match is what gets people to act religious or act holy. It is an act or a performance of the flesh, and this will lead you to be frustrated, or worse, you'll walk away. And this is how prodigal sons are made. Paul's frustration comes out in Romans chapter 7, verse 24. O wretched man that I am, who will deliver me from this body of death? Here's the answer to that battle. In verse 25, I thank God through our Lord Jesus Christ, so that with the mind I will serve the will of God, but with the flesh the will of sin. He says my mind is going to stay on the will of God, and to the will of the flesh I will give it no attention. You need to starve that will of the flesh and give it no attention. That is the only way to make it powerless. Always subject it to God's will and don't wrestle with it. Remember, we're told that a double-minded man is unstable in every way. Paul concludes, I will with my mind keep it on God's will only. I know as a prodigal son you feel you failed. You left the Father's house to follow your will, and it led to the pig pen. And you want to get cleaned up and go back to the Father and your Father's will for you. There is an example. In Luke 5:12 it reads, And it came to pass, Jesus was in a certain city, and he saw a man with leprosy. Now leprosy was once considered a condition of sin. And the man saw Jesus and fell on his face. And the man said, If you will, you can make me clean. This man first knew where to go to get cleaned up. And second, he was ready to subject himself to God's will. He says, If you will, you can clean me. And Jesus puts forth his hand and says, I will. Be clean. It is the will of the Father that you return to him and be cleaned. But first the man recognized his condition and fell on his face before him. This is where you begin. Your will got you there. If you listen to his will, you'll go back. This is food that I've provided to my family for years. I want to now provide it to you. I hope you'll share it with a friend. If you like it, I'll provide more. Thank you for listening, and God bless you.